My name is Abigail, and I thought buying a house with a garden in upstate New York would be the start of something beautiful, a place where I could plant roots, maybe even find peace after years of scraping by. The day I closed on that house, I could almost smell the wildflowers I'd grow. Picture myself sipping coffee on a porch swing, free from the chaos of my life. But that dream shattered faster than a dropped glass when my husband, Caleb, walked into our tiny apartment with his mother trailing behind, both of them wearing grins that made my stomach twist. "Good news, Abigail," Caleb said, his voice too chipper. "My mom and my sister are moving into the new house with us." His mother nodded, her eyes glinting like she'd already won. "And if you don't like it, Caleb's ready to divorce you. Right, honey?" She patted his arm, and he didn't flinch. I stood there, keys to my new house still warm in my hand, feeling the air get sucked out of the room. Divorce? Over this? I'd poured every dime I'd saved into that house, working late nights at the ad agency, crafting slogans for toothpaste and car insurance while my heart ached for something stable. And now my mother-in-law was dangling my marriage like a threat, her mean-spirited daughter sure to tag along if she moved in. I'd lived with them before, in their falling-apart rental, and the thought of their daily harassment, snide comments, endless chores, stolen moments of peace, following me to my sanctuary made my skin crawl. "No," I said, my voice shaking but firm. "I'm not living with you." My mother-in-law's eyebrows shot up, her face twisting into a smirk. She reached into her purse and pulled out divorce papers, Caleb's signature already scrawled across them. "Sign here, then," she said, her voice cold as ice. "If you're so stubborn, you don't deserve this family or the house." Caleb just stood there, avoiding my eyes, his silence louder than any words. She didn't care about me or our marriage. She wanted the house, plain and simple. I looked at her triumphant expression, then at Caleb's cowardice, and something inside me shifted. I grabbed the pen, signed the papers without a word, packed a bag, and walked out. But as I left, a smile tugged at my lips, one I fought to hide. They thought they'd won, but they had no idea what I was planning. Let me back up. I'm Abigail, a marketing coordinator at a mid-sized ad agency in Rochester, New York. I'm in my 30s, with no college degree but a knack for turning words into sales. Growing up, it was just me and my mom in a cramped apartment, her working double shifts at a diner to keep us afloat. She was tough, loving in her own way, but always too tired to talk much. I learned early to fend for myself, to hustle for every opportunity. That's how I landed my job at the agency, thanks to my boss, David, who saw potential in me despite my lack of credentials. I owe him a lot, which is why when his friend Mark, a manager at a local newspaper, introduced me to Caleb, I didn't say no to a date, even though I wasn't sure. Caleb was charming at first, tall, with a boyish grin and a salesman's smooth talk. He worked at the same newspaper as Mark, selling ad space, and he had a way of making you feel like you were the only person in the room. After 5 months of dating, he pushed hard for marriage, saying he wanted a future together. I was hesitant, but I craved stability, a family to call my own after years of feeling alone. So I said yes, ignoring the little voice in my head warning me to slow down. Big mistake. The trouble started right after the wedding. Caleb insisted we live with his mother in their old rental house, a sagging place in a small town an hour from Rochester. He said she was frail, recovering from a chronic illness, and he couldn't leave her alone since his dad had passed years ago. I agreed, thinking it was temporary, hoping to be a good wife. But the moment I moved in, my mother-in-law dropped her sweet, fragile act. "Abigail, the dishes aren't clean enough," she'd snap, her voice sharp as a knife. "And the garden's a mess, weeded today." Not a day went by without her barking orders, treating me like a maid instead of family. The house itself was a nightmare, creaking floors, peeling wallpaper, drafts that rattled the windows. It was a rental they got cheap from a friend, but it felt like a prison. Caleb was no help. He'd shrug off his mother's cruelty with a weak, "She's got a temper, huh?" and never stood up for me. When I begged to move out, just the two of us, he'd mumble excuses about money or his mom's health, his eyes darting away. I started waking up with knots in my stomach, my hands trembling for no reason. One morning, I found myself crying in the bathroom, unable to explain why. A doctor later told me I had an adjustment disorder, fancy words for my life breaking me down. Every day in that house chipped away at me, and my mother-in-law didn't care. She'd yell about undone chores or drag me to her doctor's appointments, ignoring my full-time job and the exhaustion eating me alive. Then things got worse. My sister-in-law showed up, fresh off a messy divorce, with her young son in tow. She was a carbon copy of her mother, same sharp tongue, same entitled attitude. She'd sprawl on the couch, scrolling her phone, while I scrubbed her dishes or watched her kid. "Parenting's harder than it looks, Abigail," she'd say, smirking, as she left her son with me to hit the bars with her sketchy friends. I was drowning, and Caleb just watched, too weak to challenge his family. But deep down, I wasn't broken yet. I was angry, and that anger was building into a plan, one that would turn their greed against them and set me free. Living in that crumbling rental house with Caleb's family was like being trapped in a storm that never let up. My mother-in-law's voice was the thunder, booming through the walls every morning. "Abigail, you didn't dust the shelves properly," she'd scold, her eyes narrowing as she leaned on her cane, a prop I'd learned, since she walked just fine when she thought I wasn't looking. "And the laundry's piling up. What kind of wife are you?" I'd bite my tongue, my hands raw from scrubbing, my head pounding from lack of sleep. I worked long hours at the ad agency, crafting campaigns that paid for half the bills, but to her, I was just a lazy daughter-in-law who couldn't do anything right. The house itself was falling apart, a tired old place in a small upstate New York town, with warped floorboards and windows that whistled in the wind. My mother-in-law would complain about it constantly, her voice dripping with resentment. "This dump's a disgrace," she'd say, glaring at Caleb. "We need a real home, not this rented shack." Caleb would nod, promising her a new house we couldn't afford, while I stood there, invisible, my dreams of a quiet life slipping further away. I'd beg him at night, whispering in our cramped bedroom, "Can't we move out? Just us?" But he'd mumble something about his mom's health and rollover, leaving me staring at the ceiling, my chest tight with anxiety. I wasn't always this fragile. Back in Rochester, I'd been proud of my grit, clawing my way into a marketing job despite no fancy degree. My mom raised me to keep going, no matter how hard things got, but this was different. The constant criticism, the endless chores, it was like they were trying to erase me. One evening, after a 12-hour workday, I came home to find my mother-in-law waiting, tapping her foot. "You forgot to buy my medication," she snapped. "I could have had a spell because of you." I apologized, my throat tight, but inside I was screaming. I wasn't her nurse, her maid, or her punching bag, but she didn't care. And Caleb? He'd just grin, like it was all a joke. "Mom's intense, huh?" he'd say, and I'd want to shake him, to make him see how much it hurt. Then my sister-in-law rolled in, and the storm got uglier. She showed up one afternoon with a suitcase and her 5-year-old son, her eyes red from crying about her divorce. "My ex threw me out," she said, collapsing onto the couch like she owned it. "Said he was done with me." I felt a pang of sympathy until she admitted she'd cheated with his coworker and neglected her kid. Any pity I had dried up fast. She looked like her mother, with the same sharp cheekbones and sharper tongue, and she acted like her too. She didn't lift a finger, leaving her son's toys scattered and his meals to me. "You don't get it, Abigail," she'd say, smirking as she painted her nails. "Raising a kid's tough. You'll help out, right?" Help out? I was already stretched thin, juggling work and my mother-in-law's demands. But she'd dump her son on me to go drinking at dive bars, coming home reeking of cheap whiskey. One weekend, I caught her rifling through my dresser, my heart sinking as I saw her holding my dad's old watch, a keepsake from the man who died when I was a kid. "What's this worth?" she asked, casual as if it were junk. "Sell it, Abigail. I need cash." I snatched it back, my hands shaking. "These are mine," I said, my voice low. She just laughed, like my pain was a game. Later, I found my makeup, a scarf, even a pair of earrings gone. She'd taken them, probably to pawn for bar money. The final straw came when a friend from another ad agency called me. "Abigail, I saw Caleb downtown," she said, her voice hesitant. "He was with some woman, arm in arm, all cozy." My stomach dropped. I confronted Caleb that night, my voice shaking with rage. "Who is she, Caleb? Tell me the truth." He stammered, his face pale. "Just a friend from a bar, Abigail. It's nothing." "A bar? A friend?" I knew better. My friend had seen him with Haley, a bartender known for her flashy style and flirty smile. I felt betrayed, humiliated, but when I told my mother-in-law, she just scoffed. "If you were a better wife, he wouldn't stray," she said. "A real woman lets a man be a man." I stared at her, my blood boiling. Her logic was twisted, but it was their family's logic. Excuse every wrong, blame me for everything. I started noticing more late-night texts on Caleb's phone, his excuses about working late. My friend got proof. Photos of him and Haley slipping into a motel. I held those pictures in my hands, my heart breaking, but something else was growing too. Resolve. I wasn't going to let them crush me. I started planning quietly, carefully. I'd heard about houses in the countryside, cheap because of old coal mining tunnels that made the ground unstable. Doors wouldn't close, foundations sank. It was a trap for unsuspecting buyers. I met with a real estate agent, pretending I was just curious, and found the perfect house. A beautiful shell hiding a rotten core. I left the listing in my bag, knowing my sister-in-law's sticky fingers would find it. She did, waving it at dinner one night, her eyes gleaming. "Look at this, Abigail. A house with a garden. You should have told us." I played dumb, my heart racing. The bait was set. I'd always been good at keeping secrets, a skill I picked up as a kid when I'd hide my mom's late-night tears from the neighbors. Now that skill was my weapon. My sister-in-law's greedy eyes on that real estate listing were the first step in my plan to turn my in-laws' cruelty against them. The house in the listing was a dream on paper. 3 bedrooms, a wraparound porch, a garden bursting with roses. All for a steal because of its dirty little secret. The land sat over old coal mining tunnels, unstable and sinking. I'd spent weeks researching with my real estate agent, a no-nonsense woman named Tara who knew the area's quirks. "Only newcomers buy these," she'd warned. "Locals know better." I nodded, keeping my face neutral, but inside, I was building a trap. I let the plan simmer, playing my part as the beaten-down daughter-in-law. My mother-in-law kept up her tirade, yelling about unwashed windows or my lazy cooking, while Caleb dodged my pleas to move out. My sister-in-law was worse, leaving her son with me to go party, her latest theft a pair of my mom's old pearl earrings. Each insult, each stolen trinket, fueled me. I started recording everything. My mother-in-law's venomous rants on my phone's voice memos, her voice sharp as she called me useless or a disgrace. I hid a small camera in my bedroom, catching my sister-in-law rummaging through my things. And I kept those photos of Caleb and Haley tucked away like ammunition. One evening, I forgot my bag on the kitchen table, the real estate listing poking out just enough. Sure enough, my sister-in-law pounced, spreading the glossy photos across the dinner table. "Abigail, you're holding out on us," she said, her voice dripping with fake excitement. "This house is perfect." My mother-in-law leaned in, her eyes greedy. "Spacious, cheap. Why didn't you tell us?" I stammered. "I was just looking." I didn't, but Caleb cut me off. "A house with a garden? That's a big move, Abigail. I'm the head of the household, so it'll be in my name." "Got it." I nodded, biting back a smile. They were taking the bait, hook and all. Over the next few days, they wouldn't shut up about the house. My mother-in-law talked about hosting card games on the porch. My sister-in-law dreamed of a garden she'd never tend. Caleb, ever the follower, puffed up like he was making a bold decision. "Let's do it," he said finally, signing the papers I'd prepped with Tara. I used my savings for the down payment, every penny I'd scraped together, but I didn't care. This wasn't about money, it was about freedom. The day we closed, I stood outside the house, its white picket fence gleaming under the upstate sun, and felt a thrill. They thought they were getting a palace. They were getting a prison. A few days later, as they packed boxes, Caleb and his mother sat me down. "We're all moving in together," Caleb said, his grin smug. "It'll be great, right?" My mother-in-law chimed in. "You're not going to argue, are you? If you do, Caleb's ready to divorce you." "Your boss David wouldn't like that, would he?" There it was, their favorite threat, using my job and my debt to David against me. Mark, the newspaper manager who'd introduced me to Caleb, had made it clear my position depended on keeping things smooth. They knew I was trapped, or so they thought. I took a deep breath, my heart pounding. "No," I said, my voice steady. "I'm not living with you." My mother-in-law's face turned red, veins bulging. "What did you say?" she hissed, pulling out divorce papers from her purse, Caleb's signature glaring at me. "Sign, then. You're nothing without us." I looked at Caleb, waiting for him to speak, to choose me for once. He didn't. So I picked up the pen, signed, and grabbed my bag. "I'm done," I said, walking out the door. As I stepped into the cool evening air, I fought the urge to laugh. They had no idea what was coming. I moved into a small apartment in Rochester, a cozy place with big windows and no yelling. My phone buzzed nonstop, my mother-in-law, furious, leaving voicemails. "Abigail, you better explain yourself," she shouted. I ignored her until moving day, when her calls became relentless. Finally, I answered, keeping my voice calm. "What's wrong?" I asked. She was screaming before I finished. "This house is a disaster. The floors are uneven. The doors won't close. You knew, didn't you?" I played dumb, my heart racing with glee. "A defective house? That's awful. Are you sure?" She was apoplectic, demanding I meet them. I agreed, but on my terms. I'd face them one last time, armed with everything I'd collected, ready to end this for good. The days after I left the defective house felt like the first deep breaths I'd taken in years. My Rochester apartment was small, but it was mine. No shouting, no stolen earrings, no Caleb's weak excuses. I'd lie on my couch, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of my old life lift, replaced by a fire I hadn't known I had. But I wasn't done yet. My mother-in-law's voicemails piled up, each one angrier than the last. "Abigail, you tricked us. Get over here and fix this," she'd yell. I let her stew, knowing she'd demand a meeting eventually. When she did, I chose the place, a bustling cafe in downtown Rochester, public enough to keep things civil, but small enough for me to lay out my trap. I spent those days preparing, gathering my evidence, like a lawyer building a case. I had hours of audio recordings, my mother-in-law's voice sneering, "You're a useless wife, Abigail," or "Do your job, or I'll call David." I had footage from a hidden camera, showing my sister-in-law slipping my dad's watch into her pocket, her eyes darting like a thief's. And those photos of Caleb with Haley, laughing as they ducked into a motel, were burned into my mind. I'd also gotten a letter from my doctor confirming my adjustment disorder, the nausea and tears that had haunted me. Each piece was a brick in the wall I'd build to protect myself, and to make them pay. I wasn't always this calculating. Growing up, I was the girl who'd apologize for things that weren't my fault, desperate to keep the peace. My mom taught me to stay quiet, to work hard, because life didn't hand out second chances to people like us. But living with Caleb's family changed me. Their cruelty woke something up, a part of me that refused to break. I'd spent months feeling like a ghost in that house, my voice drowned out by their demands. Now I was ready to speak. The night before the meeting, I sat at my kitchen table, replaying the recordings, each word a reminder of why I was doing this. My mother-in-law's favorite line, "Know your place, Abigail," made my fists clench. My sister-in-law's laugh as she pawned my things. Caleb's lies about Haley. I wasn't just fighting for myself. I was fighting for every moment they'd stolen from me. Every night I'd cried myself to sleep. I practiced what I'd say, keeping my voice steady, picturing their faces when I dropped the truth. It felt good, like reclaiming a piece of myself I'd lost. When the day came, I walked into the cafe 10 minutes late, letting them simmer. My mother-in-law sat at a corner table, her face red with fury, tapping her fingers. My sister-in-law slouched beside her, scrolling her phone, while Caleb forced a nervous smile. About time, my mother-in-law snapped. How dare you keep us waiting? I slid into the chair, my bag heavy with evidence, and met her eyes. I don't owe you respect, I said coolly. What do you want? My sister-in-law leaned forward, her voice sharp. This house is a mess because of you. Floors sinking, windows stuck, you set us up. Take responsibility. I leaned back, crossing my arms. You chose that house. I told you, I was just looking. My mother-in-law's eyes narrowed. Don't play dumb. You knew it was defective. I shrugged, my heart pounding but my face calm. Did I? You were so eager to move in. They faltered, unable to argue. Their old rental was under renovation, leaving them stuck in the sinking house. I let the silence hang, then opened my bag. I've got something to say, I said, pulling out the doctor's letter. You pushed me so hard I got sick. Adjustment disorder caused by your abuse. I slid the paper across the table, watching their faces freeze. My mother-in-law scoffed. You're weak, Abigail. A real daughter-in-law would have handled it. I didn't flinch. Calling me useless and a disgrace every day? That's slander. Up to a year in prison, maybe a $5,000 fine. Her jaw dropped, but I wasn't done. And threatening to tell David about the divorce to control me? That's extortion, 3 years or $5,000. Caleb shifted, his voice shaky. Abigail, that's a bit much, isn't it? I ignored him, turning to my sister-in-law. And you, stealing my dad's watch, my earrings? I've got it on camera. I held up my phone. The footage paused on her guilty face. Theft serious. Up to 12 years or a fine. They stared, speechless, as I laid out the recordings, the photos of Caleb and Haley. I felt powerful, like I was finally the one in control. I've got enough to go to the police, I said. And I will, unless you leave me alone. My mother-in-law tried to argue, but her voice was weak. My sister-in-law looked pale, her Br Abigail gone. Caleb just sat there, head down, like the coward he'd always been. I'd won, and they knew it. As I walked out of that Rochester cafe, my heart was pounding, but not with fear, with triumph. My mother-in-law, my sister-in-law, and Caleb sat there, deflated, their faces a mix of shock and defeat. I'd laid out my evidence like a winning hand. The recordings of my mother-in-law's verbal abuse, the camera footage of my sister-in-law's theft, the photos of Caleb's betrayal with Haley. They couldn't deny it, not with my doctor's letter proving how their cruelty had broken me down. I'd warned them I'd go to the police if they didn't back off, and for the first time, they had nothing to say. I left them in that sinking house, their greed turned against them, and stepped into a life that was finally mine. The weeks that followed were quiet, blissful. My apartment became my sanctuary, filled with plants I'd bought to replace the garden I'd lost. I went back to work at the ad agency, my focus sharper, my pitches stronger. David, my boss, noticed the change. You seem different, Abigail, he said one day, smiling. More like yourself. I didn't tell him about the divorce or the plan. Some victories are private, but I felt a weight lift, knowing I'd kept my job and my dignity. My ex-family didn't fare so well. Word got around, as it does in small towns. Caleb's affair and his family's mistreatment of me spread like wildfire at his newspaper job. Mark, the manager who'd introduced us, turned cold, and Caleb's colleagues shunned him. Unable to handle the whispers and glares, he quit, but finding work in a tight-knit community where everyone knew his story wasn't easy. My real estate agent, Tara, kept me updated. The house was a nightmare, doors jamming, floors tilting, the mortgage a noose around their necks. My mother-in-law and sister-in-law were convicted of minor charges based on my evidence, slapped with fines they couldn't afford. They started working odd jobs, something they'd never done before, just to scrape by. One evening, as I was leaving work, I saw a figure waiting outside. Caleb, but not the smug salesman I'd married. He looked worn, his jacket frayed, his face lined. Abigail, he said, his voice soft. You look good. I crossed my arms, keeping my distance. What do you want, Caleb? He sighed, staring at the ground. I messed up. Mom and my sister, they're barely hanging on, fighting all the time. The house is falling apart. I should have been on your side. I waited, letting his words hang. He looked up, eyes pleading. Can we try again? I'll cut them off, I swear. You're the one I want. I laughed, sharp and cold. I'm seeing someone else, Caleb. And even if I wasn't, I'd never go back. His face crumpled, and he sank to his knees, but I felt nothing. The man I'd loved was a mirage, and I was done chasing shadows. Don't contact me again, I said, walking away. He didn't follow, and I never heard from him again. Tara told me later that their lives unraveled completely. My mother-in-law and sister-in-law turned on each other, their fights echoing through the neighborhood. Broken dishes, shouting matches. They were trapped in that defective house, too broke to leave, too stubborn to sell at a loss. The community shunned them, their reputation in tatters. I could picture them, huddled in that sinking house, blaming each other for their misery, their dreams of a grand life reduced to dust. It wasn't joy I felt, but justice, a quiet, steady satisfaction that they'd reaped what they'd sown. As for me, I found something better than revenge, a new beginning. My new partner, Ethan, came into my life a few months later. He's a salesman at a trading company, divorced like me, with a calm strength that makes me feel safe. He listens when I talk, laughs at my bad puns, and never makes me feel small. We're planning a small wedding, nothing flashy, just us and a few friends by a lake in upstate New York. Sometimes, when I think back to those dark days with Caleb's family, my eyes sting, but Ethan's there, his hand on mine, reminding me I'm home. Those years taught me something. Pain can hollow you out, but it can also carve space for something stronger. I'm kinder now, not because I'm soft, but because I know what it's like to feel invisible. I use that to connect with others, to listen, to lift them up. My life feels like a gift I fought for, and I'm not wasting a second of it. To everyone who's followed this journey, thank you. You've walked with me through betrayal, battles, and a hard-won victory. If my story hit you, stirred something in your heart, hit that subscribe button and join us. Every scar tells a story of survival, every step a chance for a new start. Keep fighting for your truth, and I'll meet you where the light breaks through.